On.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome in. It's the Wager Alarm live stream. I'm your host, Howard Bender. With me here, of course, Craig Mish. Time to start talking picks, props, more picks, point spreads, line movement. It's Tuesday. We're going to talk about lines for college football. We're going to talk about lines moving for NFL Week 1. We're obviously just 2 days away from that Thursday game. Craig, I want to start off in the college realm here. Why? Because you hit it, Craig. We talked last week on the live stream here on Wager Alarm. We talked about Oregon facing Bowling Green. Oregon won by 34 points, covered the spread. You were like, that's my lock, baby. Well, now we're looking at a couple of more games here this weekend. Tell me, where are you headed?
Well, we'll make the final decision when we do the live stream Friday night, and we'll go over like the final picks there. But I'll kind of, cue you in. And we talked last week about the value of different plays. And what's important to note is that, Howard, that line between Oregon and Bowling Green actually went to 34, and in some places 34.5 and even 35. So if you waited right before that game and you watched the live stream and said, oh, Saturday, I remember, they may have talked about, they may have mentioned it, you didn't win. If you bet that, you would have tied or you would have pushed. So Oregon did win the game handily. Bowling Green did put a few points up. They ended up winning by 34, but it was 31 at the time we talked. It was 32 the next day. And sometimes this happens with the better schools against the lesser schools. Those lines will just get inflated because, and again, you're going into one of the last games of the night. Think about it from a Las Vegas perspective. Are people going to roll in on Bowling Green plus the points, or are they going to bet Oregon? A lot of people in this case did bet on Oregon. So that was a win. But again, it's important to note every week when we do this on Tuesday, what we'll try to do is cue people in as to which way the lines are going to move. This way, that'll give you an idea as to what to do. So sometimes I'll give an opinion and tell you what I like, but other times it's just to tell you if you like one side or the other, what to do with the play, because this is just so much about line value than anything else. I think the first week in college football was really interesting. The last two nights, in fact, were probably the most interesting because in general, and they were the two, hugely watched games last night between Virginia Tech and Florida State, and then the night before between Miami and LSU, and the games were horrible. Both teams were blown out from Florida. Florida State was killed by Virginia Tech last night, and the night before Miami, and so you had both underdogs in this case ended up winning. Florida State at home, and then they played that game in Texas between LSU and Miami, and it wasn't even close. Notre Dame, Michigan was one of the most watched games in Notre Dame history. So you could just tell how much interest there is in that first week of college football, and then we're going to have pro football. And I think what's also curious to me is that, are we switching now? Are we getting a lot more people moving over to watching college football this year? We're going to have to see how that plays out. We know the numbers in the NFL have been a little bit down. It's not going to stop people from gambling on the NFL, but maybe people from watching. I don't know. It just it's a weird landscape that we're living in now, and we'll just have to monitor that and see how it plays in the end. Penn State had a wild finish against Appalachian State. That was really one of the biggest underdogs. And then an FCS team, which is not a Division I team, ended up beating Kansas. So it was a wild first week in college football. Now we're also going to see in week 2 of college some really big spreads again. And then as you get to week 3, you start to get more of the conference matchups. And so where you really can start to get an advantage is starting to pay attention to those teams that are even 30, 40-point favorites, but how they look in those games may be a precursor to how they look when they get into conference play. In terms of college this week, there are a few games that I've seen some live movement on, and we can talk about those. The first one is UCLA and Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a very big favorite against Florida Atlantic, Howard, this past week. Of course, FAU's coach is Lane Kiffin. And in terms of Oklahoma, there's just some uncertainty there as to how they would be at the start of the season. They always notoriously play very well in Norman and cover a lot of spreads in Oklahoma. But because FAU was coming off that great season, some people thought, well, maybe FAU will give Oklahoma a game. What I don't think they really factored in is the kid who was drafted by the Oakland A's in the first round, their quarterback. He's going to play 1 year this year at Oklahoma, and then he's going to go play for the A's. He's already committed to doing that. Kyler Murray, he looked fantastic. And on the flip side, Chip Kelly, who was an announcer last year, of course, the 49ers coach the year before, his team looked terrible. They lost to Cincinnati. The Bruins now, over the last few years, have just really gotten off to some bad starts and have had to rally to get to that 6-win mark. and get into the bowls. They're now 1-9 against the spread in September in the last 10 games. So that's not just Chip Kelly. It's UCLA. For whatever reason, they don't get off to good starts. The line was 29. The line, was 25. Oklahoma minus 25. There's no faith whatsoever in UCLA, Howard. So right now that line is up to 29. So if there's any thoughts on taking the Sooners before the weekend, you need to do that now. And conversely, if you think that UCLA, they're able to put it together, and you think that that is too much of a point spread, then what you do is you probably wait right until kickoff, Howard, and then you would take the UCLA Bruins. And again, an early start for them too. I think it'll be 11 a.m. Central Time. That's like 9 or 8 where you guys are Pacific Time. But, Chip Kelly's going to be, I think, eventually a great coach. He'll get that system going just like he did in Auburn. He's a college coach, but his first year at UCLA is not even dealing with his own kids. He's dealing usually with a lot of the kids that were there previously. So that's the first line to talk about, Howard. Oklahoma, 25 opening up on Sunday night, Monday morning, now up to 29 on Tuesday.
Didn't it jump to like 30 and then went back to 29 as well?
Yeah, it was 30. Now there's some buyback money. That's going to happen. There's going to be people who are going to see an opportunity on a big line, and think about that. Like, UCLA is a Division I team, and it's just that the kid Murray, the quarterback for Oklahoma, looked so good, not just throwing the ball, but running as well. And that can happen when you have a little bit of an unknown quantity at the quarterback position in college. That can affect things. In the NFL, we know that the game is predominantly built around the quarterback, not always in college because of the different systems that they run. In fact, in some places, like, for example, in Army and Navy, like their quarterbacks don't throw and they're just running the ball all the time. Some of them have that wishbone type system where they're just constantly running the option. Georgia Tech's quarterback, in general, in the last decade, they've had 1 or 2 quarterbacks. The rest of them just run the ball. So it's not as important in college as it is the NFL. Maybe there was some uncertainty with Murray as to what he would be coming off the year that Baker Mayfield had. Murray showed that he is definitely legit. I don't know that this would be a game that I'd be interested in wagering on, but if you are looking at the game and looking for value, the value right now, if you're going to take Oklahoma, would have to be right now, because I think this will move back to 30 or 31 by the time Saturday comes.
All right, let's move on to a different game. Let's go with a smaller spread here, but it's still kind of on the move, and there's some interesting factors there. Looking at Michigan State going up against Arizona State. It's -7 right now. I believe it opened up at -6. But Michigan State, the interesting thing is they increased the spread. Michigan State, they barely beat Utah State this past week. I mean, they didn't.
Yeah, they
didn't look like that great of a team. I don't know if they were just taking the game too lightly or whatnot, but I don't know. I didn't think they looked all that good, and so to see the line move already for them against big old Herm Edwards, we'll see.
Yeah, and I think that Arizona State's an interesting team this year. They have a nice young quarterback there, Manny Wilkins. He's in his final year in college, but still relatively young. So he has the full gamut of being able to run that offense now for 2 or 3 years. The Pac-12 in general does not match up against these big teams that run the ball. So that's why the line is 7, and that's why Michigan State is favored in this one. And going into the season, remember, Michigan State didn't have that great a year last year, so they get a lot of those guys back, a lot of returning starters, and I think the expectation is that they'll have a better team than they had last season. But I like what I've seen from Arizona State, and they are playing at home, and they are getting 7 points, and I think that's a live dog going into Saturday. We'll have to see the way that this thing moves, and sometimes, Howard, before I'll make a bet or before I'll look at a bet, I'll read the lines more than I read the teams. It's really important to know which way the public money is going, because a lot of times, as we've talked about, the public is wrong. But I thought that it was a really good first performance for Arizona State. Arizona State last year, without Herm Edwards as coach, got off to a really good start and then kind of faded down the stretch. That's what happens with these Pac teams. They just don't play a lot of defense. They get involved in these shootouts and can go either way. I would expect Michigan State to try to run it as much as possible. We'll see how Arizona State's defense responds. I think that if I got 7.5 in this game, I think I'm all in on Arizona State at that point. I have a feeling this is going to go back down. I think some money will go in on Arizona State. But dangerous because 2 out-of-conference teams playing completely different styles of football. Usually these lean toward the Big Ten. But in this case, I am intrigued with Arizona State this year. I think they could be one of the better teams in the conference.
Okay, so you say you think it'll probably come down a little bit, but if you get 7.5, might want to jump on that.
7.5 home dog with 2 big conferences like this, I would probably go the 7.5. And remember, on some of the online places, you can always buy points to get the number that you want, but it wouldn't be advised to buy to a 7.5. It would kind of be if it was 6.5. then you buy it to 7, and then if it lands on 7, then nobody you push, you don't lose.
Right. Okay.
I always do that on a 6.5. But in this case, if you were getting 7.5 without having to buy points, I would say that you probably lay 120 to win 100, something like that. The line will be about minus 120 on the 7.5. It's something that I'll keep an eye on this week. And when we come back Friday night, it's going to be a blast because we'll not only have the college picks, but we'll also do our super contest picks in the NFL. We're signed up for that too, so I'm super excited about that also.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Very much looking forward to it. Thank you for getting me in there, which I can definitely say. All right, so we're talking out-of-conference games in college, but let's talk about a conference game here. Why not? Georgia taking on South Carolina in South Carolina. It's a 9.5 spread right now. How much of this line do you see moving between now, say, come Friday's show?
This is another dog. I love the dogs. So this is another one where I'm going to keep a close eye on South Carolina. This is an early season game for them. Anybody who watches college football or who follows college football over the last decade knows that when it comes to the SEC, when you mention South Carolina, it's always, oh, well, they almost got there. They were close. They got off to good stuff, but they never really get to that point, whether it was under Steve Spurrier or now under Will Muschamp. They've never got into that category, at least in the SEC East, where they play against Tennessee or play against Georgia or play against the Florida Gators. They've just never got to. They've always been the second or third team in the conference. Right. Now, look, Georgia's been phenomenal, and they were phenomenal last year. Their quarterback is very good. Their defense is excellent. You saw both of those running backs, Howard, drafted in fantasy football in the NFL, right? Both of them, Sony Michel and Chubb, right? Both of them went in the first round or second round, whatever it was in the NFL. So they're gone. So Georgia has lost a little bit of firepower on offense. Now their quarterback is back and he is still there. And Georgia has really dominated this series. They won by 14 last year. They won that game in Georgia. 2 years ago in South Carolina, they won that game by 14 as well. But then why is the line, Howard, 9.5? If that's the case, why is it? And so you have to start thinking to yourself, and this is where people make the mistake, is they say, okay, well, Georgia beat them by 14 last year. They beat them by 14 the year before. This line should be 14. But again, Vegas wants your money on both sides of it. They're not interested in picking the outcome. They're interested in getting both sides and the amount of money. And why isn't this line 10 or 11 or 12? And I think the reason why is because some money is going to come in on South Carolina. So again, this is a game that I'll keep an eye on throughout the week to see the way that the line moves, but I'm leaning a little bit toward a team like the Gamecocks, who have never been in a better position than they are right now, I think, to pull an upset off. The other thing that is going to be interesting is that they're running a new offense this year in South Carolina, and they ran it in the spring, a really up-tempo offense to try and keep Georgia off their heels. But then if you go back and you watch the game that they just played, I think it was against Coastal Carolina, they didn't run it at all. So I don't know if they were hiding that for this week against Georgia, but that could be the kind of game changer that you'll see. And also the thing that we'll keep an eye on, Howard, is the total in this game. Because if indeed South Carolina is going to run an up-tempo, which a lot of teams don't do in the SEC, this game's going to go flying over that total. So I'll keep an eye on the practice reports and see what we see before Friday night. We'll retouch on this game Friday night. Right now, Georgia's a 9.5-point favorite at South Carolina. And
you like South Carolina with the 9.5 that you're getting.
I'm on Friday. I'll make the final call on all of these games. I'm
not asking for your final call. What I'm kind of curious is 9.5 the lowest.
What I would do if I was going to take South Carolina, I would do it now. And if I was doing it online, I would buy a 0.5 point and get it to 10. And I would take the Gamecocks at home plus 10. But again, here, see, with me, the way that I look at it is this, and this is, something that I've learned through the years. Howard, if Georgia was minus 11 right now, I wouldn't touch South Carolina. I'd be like, oh, they got the line right. It's obviously 11. They've won by 14 the last couple of years. But then you ask yourself, why is the line only 9.5 if they're so much better than South Carolina? And the answer is maybe they're not that much better, and maybe there will be money coming in on South Carolina. But if you are going to take them, the time is now at 10. But I think there could be some value in the over on this game also, especially if they are going to run up tempo. But it made me a little bit nervous seeing what they were going to do this spring in their spring practice, and then they didn't do it barely did it against Coastal Carolina. And I hope they were hiding it from Georgia, but maybe they changed their ways before the first game of the season. I'm not sure.
All right. All right. I want to jump to a little bit of NFL in a second here. Let me just say, you guys still have drafts left, fantasy football drafts, that is, but you don't own the masterpiece that is the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. The PDF download, folks, it's 458 pages of pure bliss. Online, it's more than 75 articles plus rankings with tiers and auction values, projections, and the ability to set your own scoring system against projections. You'll also get our ultimate cheat sheet, which takes all this information to create all you need to take to your draft and win. We'll even answer any question anytime in our live chat. Well, here's really, really good news. You ready for this one?
Yeah.
Our friends over at Fanball, all right, want you to buy it, want to buy the guide for you. So just go to fantasyalarm.com/fanball, sign up for a new account with any deposit, and you'll get the free draft guide, which is at least a $40 value. At least a $40 value. My attention added on to that, even more so. So get the draft guide for free right now, fantasyalarm.com/fanball.
I use the draft guide in all the drafts that I did so far.
And you're winning. I hear you.
So I'm obviously feeling very confident going into the season. A lot of the sleepers that we talked about in the last couple of months I ended up taking. So, we'll see.
I love it, man. I love it. All right, let's talk some NFL lines right now. Start where they're moving. Now, this is a game that we touched on the last time we were talking.
Yeah.
Buffalo at Baltimore here. It's at -7.5. We knew it was going to go up.
Right.
Talk to me here. Give me your thoughts on this one. Could this, with the announcement of Nathan Peterman as the starting quarterback.
It went right up. But that's what I was saying is that last week.
Could it go up even more?
It will go up even more. It will. Listen, if you're going to take the Ravens, and on Friday night we'll see what the line is. The Super Contest lines come out tomorrow. So the final lines, by the way, Howard, no matter what happens, they stick. They release the line and they stick. And you got to pick 5 teams. We'll do that. Okay, so if you're gonna take the Ravens, you got to do it now. I mean, that's just it. You'll buy your half a point online, or depending on who you're doing this with, maybe you can't buy. Some places you can't buy points. I think that for me, as we get closer to this, is it one game that I want to use in the Super Contest? I mean, I think probably. It does worry me a little bit that the world is going to bet the Ravens and no one is going to bet Baltimore. That is a little bit of a concern for me. I don't like that. I don't like if 80% of the public is on one side, because it's usually the other one. But I just can't find a way for the Bills in this game. I just can't. And the line doesn't even look real fishy. It looks about right. Like, this is probably where it should be. So my guess is it will go up probably to 8. I don't know that it'll go any higher than that, because then you'll have some buyback. Some people will start taking Buffalo at that point, because the Ravens are not a 40-point team or anything like that. Like, they're going to exploit the weakness of Buffalo and run the ball with Collins, I would think. Like, I mean Flacco, I don't know that you want him throwing the ball 35, 40 times in any game. So.
Well, you say that, but meanwhile, Joe Flacco, if you combine the last 3 years, Joe Flacco actually ranks in the top 3 of pass attempts in the NFL.
Does it really? Wow.
You believe that? How's Harbaugh got this guy throwing 40 times a game, and yet he does?
They haven't been able to run, in years, right? They haven't had a running back.
No. Yeah, they finally started giving Collins 20-plus touches in the second half of last year. Yeah. And that's kind of where it went. So, all right.
Maybe Peterman will surprise. I mean, look, you never know. No final decisions on this game for me now, but it seems pretty straightforward to take the Ravens. But I will tell you that I get very nervous when it's so obvious, because when it is, again, they build the hotels on people like me saying it's so obvious, and then I leave with nothing, and then they build another hotel in Vegas. So, but that's the first game that we'll keep an eye on for the week. But as we talked about last week, and I'm happy it did happen. And I see people on Twitter going, "Oh my gosh, Peterman starting." I'm like, well, who did you think was going to start? Like, you had to know if you were smart at that time. Fantasy grabbed the Ravens defense, and I did that 2 weeks ago. I mean, it was obvious that was going to happen. And then from a betting perspective, you had to take Baltimore -7 or 6.5 is what it opened up. So now you're in the dead zone. Now you cannot take Baltimore -9. Can't do that if it ends up there.
Let's revisit another game that we talked about the last time here. That's Denver-Seattle. Now, last time you and I spoke, it was Denver -2.5. You and I talked about the fact that Seattle's offensive line is atrocious. Doug Baldwin's hurt. We're still kind of up in the air with Chris Carson as a lead running back here. But now the line went up to 3, then it went back down to 2.5, and now I'm looking at the line. It's -1.5.
Yeah. It looks like
what is that?
It looked like there's some confidence on Seattle coming from somewhere. I'll look a little bit deeper as the week goes on this, but it's obvious at this point that some people feel like Seattle, there's some value to taking them. I don't see it. I don't think that the Seahawks are very good. I think they'll have a bad year. We talked about their win total last week, and I was very staunch on going under their win total. And I have a feeling Denver will be a pick for me in week 1. I'm almost positive that I'm not a believer in the Seahawks. I think that they are, getting too much respect on name value alone. Whoever they have at running back doesn't really make any difference to me. It's more of a fantasy than reality thing. The X factor is obviously Wilson, because I don't think even with Keenum at quarterback for Denver, I mean, is Denver putting a 30 spot on the Seahawks this week? I don't think so. But this could be, Howard, a 21-6 game in the 4th, and then Russell Wilson does his thing, and then all of a sudden the game's tied. Like he is the king of bringing that team back and just launching it out to Baldwin. But does he have that line anymore? Does he have those complimentary receivers anymore? Is Baldwin 100%? I can't see it. So we'll make the final call when we do our super contest picks on Friday. But Denver looks like, to me, and this isn't even about, like, you never want to look at a line and say, oh, because it's only 2, I just need them to win by 3. That's like the stupidest thing that you could say in terms of betting. It's ridiculous. But a smart move would be, Howard, is that if you were going to bet this aside from a contest, what you could do is, if the money keeps coming in on Seattle and you want to take Denver as an example, and the line goes to 1, you could just take Denver on the money line and lay about -135 or 135 to win 100. And then if they win by 1, you don't push, you win outright. So sometimes I'll do that with a home team only laying a point or a 1.5. I'll bet it on the money line. And that could be what I end up doing with Denver this week.
Okay. All right. I can dig that. Now, we talked a little over-under action last week. Titans, Dolphins. We went through the whole thing of people betting what they want to happen as opposed to people betting what's actually going on. And obviously everybody looks at the over and the under, and we always kind of want the over to happen. You and I were talking about Tennessee at Miami. I was talking about how bad Miami's run defense is. And you've got Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry in the backfield. Matt LaFleur, the offensive coordinator, very experienced guy. So I was questioning whether or not we take the over there, and now it's what, 45 right now. I think it was like right around there.
I think it was 45 or 46. Yeah, so it's staying more or less the same, but I think it will go down some more. So if you want to bet the over, and we saw this one differently, but I'm not sure that I'll have an opinion one way or the other.
Right.
But and I don't have a strong one now on it. But if you did feel strongly about the over, you should wait, because I think this is going to go down even more by the time kickoff starts.
Beautiful, beautiful. Any other NFL games you want to kind of chime in about? Lines?
Yeah. What's interesting is that you look at a game, and I'll give you a perfect example of one that just seems like a trap in a big way, and that's Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Like, who in their right mind would take Tampa Bay? But Howard, the Saints aren't -21. They're -9.5. Something tells me Tampa Bay is going to cover this game. I mean, nothing points toward that except for the line. Like, why is it only 9.5? 3 of the last 4 times these teams have played, it's been a touchdown or less. Tampa Bay has won one of those games in surprise. I don't know. I mean, Fitzpatrick may not be the better quarterback for this game. He may be the better quarterback to cover, though. That's the difference here in this one. If it's Winston, I don't know if I feel as good, because he's going to throw like 4 picks, make some big mistakes.
Right.
But this will be a very heavily bet public game with the Saints, and I think Tampa Bay may be the pick. I think I may take Tampa because it looks so bad. That's what that's what makes me want to do it, is to go the other way.
Listen,
and
I will never ever forget. I was I guess it was probably like week 17. It was a survivor pool I was doing. And Tampa Bay was in a spot where if they won, win and you're in, kind of thing. And
Right.
it was a divisional game, and I kind of feel like it was I can't remember who they were playing, but it was like that point, and I was like so sure it was gonna happen, and then boom, it didn't happen there. And I think, yeah, you look at a 9.5-point spread here with the Saints over Tampa Bay. I could definitely see this turning into a little closer, only for some of the reasons that you're saying here. It just
when it seems off, it is, man.
Everything seems like a New
How
Orleans
could you take
blowout.
Tampa Bay? Exactly. How could you possibly take Tampa Bay in this game? It's like, and that's why you take Tampa Bay.
That's why you take Tampa Bay.
There isn't a ton of analysis here other than that. They have played close games. They do know each other relatively well. I wouldn't feel as confident. I feel confident in Winston being able to win games for his team, but in a bad situation where they're down, he tends to make a lot of mistakes. Whereas Fitzpatrick, I don't know that he would make the same ones. I kind of think that there's a chance Barber ends up being pretty good at running back there. I do like their receivers. It's crazy. It's crazy to even think of that notion of doing it, but this is one of those lines where I say the line should be 12, 13. It's not. It's 9.5. They have played competitive games against each other in the past. There's a possibility that I would go Tampa. By the way, if this was and I've heard a lot of this because a lot of people have asked me about the suicide pool and who I would take week 1, it would be Baltimore. I would take Baltimore in the suicide pool.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
That's for sure. Even like the Saints are minus 9.5. I have more confidence that Baltimore's going to win. Maybe not cover as much. Maybe in terms of the line, I have no. And there's other games too, by the way, I think that are better than these. But if you're playing in the survivor pools, for people that don't know, you could take one team each week, and you can't take that team again, and it's not against the spread; it's just to win. So you think about that, and you're like, okay, New Orleans. Oh, they're definitely going to beat Tampa Bay. Maybe so, but how many times are you really going to take the Ravens in a suicide pool over the course of the season? No matter how good the Ravens end up being, and they may win 9 or 10 games, maybe 11, they always play those close games against the Steelers, against the Browns. They always end up being close, and Tucker kicks a 60-yard field goal and they win. They're going to win. I think Baltimore's going to beat Buffalo. I think they'll crush them, but if I had to guess about just a win from the two, wouldn't shock me to see Tampa go to New Orleans and pull off some crazy upset. It would shock me to see Buffalo go to Baltimore and win. I cannot see that happen.
I got you. Speaking of survivor pools, guys, $1 million survivor pool. Check out Fantasy Factor. They got a little twist on that. It's a $1 million prize each week for the first 3 weeks. You'll select a team that'll simply just win their game. Just like Craig said, win and that's it. No spread. For the remaining 14 weeks, you need to pick 2 teams that will simply win. You can't pick the team twice. All right, so just go to fantasyalarm.com/survivor and get in this game. Fantasy Factor, it's a DFS site with exclusively single entry contests, giving you a much better chance at winning. Okay, so no need to play multi-entry contests against experienced players with big bankrolls on the big sites. They got their algorithms that kind of kick out all the permutations of winning lineups, whatever. Become a Factor today. Right now, get $5 free money immediately with any deposit. Go to fantasyalarm.com/factor. That's fantasyalarm.com/factor. Now, Craig, I just want to kind of wrap things up here today. And I want to do this as actually like a regular basis. And that's talking about games that are too tough to call, too close to call. Maybe and I'm talking like on a Tuesday. Maybe the line moves, and we think differently on a Friday. But when we're looking at some of the lines on Tuesday, you can almost kind of weed out which games you want to look at, which games you don't want to look at. Are there any of those games on your radar right now where you're like, you know what, too close to call for me right now? I'll revisit on Friday when I see when the lines are, but for the time being, I'm out.
Yeah, and a good example of it is it's not about like a small spread that would make me think that way, because as I told you, I feel pretty confident, and I'll make the final call Friday on Denver. Like, I do like Denver against Seattle, even though they're a 1 or a 1.5 point favorite. I just don't like Seattle. So it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with the game itself. The first one is Chiefs-Chargers. Like, The Chargers are a 3-point favorite, so that's basically telling you they have no home field advantage whatsoever, Howard. They're playing that game in L.A. We know what that stadium looks like. It's going to have all the Chiefs fans there. For some reason, they don't get their home fans. I mean, and in L.A., no less. It's just a shame that the Chargers have to wait another year to get in that stadium. Hasn't hurt the Rams playing in L.A., but I think it's hurt the Chargers to a degree. There's some people who feel like the Chargers could be a possible Super Bowl contender. And so I think you kind of know what you're getting with the Chargers. Howard, I don't think anybody has a clue what you're getting with the Chiefs. Nobody knows what Mahomes is going to be.
What are you talking about? Interception,
or maybe 5 touchdowns. Like this is just one of those where he could be a star, he could be a bust. I don't know. And I hear so many people like making these predictions of who's going to do what. It's so stupid. Nobody really knows for sure. And I'm not afraid in fantasy, in reality, in betting, in life, unlike a lot of other people. I'm not afraid to say I don't know. I think I know what L.A. I keep saying San Diego. I think I know what L.A. is going to give me. I don't know what the Chiefs are going to give me. So that's one game at this point, Howard, that I'd like to see the first game the Chiefs play to get a better idea as to what they're going to look like, because I could put Mahomes as 300, 5 touchdowns. I could put him down as 150 and 5 picks. No clue on that one. So as of right now, the line says to me, coin flip.
Okay. Any others?
Dallas is another team to me that's interesting because I don't know what they're going to look like this season. They don't have Des Bryant. They have different receivers there. Witten is gone. I think Prescott is a good buy low candidate. I don't think he is as bad as he was last season. The game is in Carolina. In general, people bet the Cowboys. They're America's team. The money always is on them. And so that's why this line is 3. If this was Dallas at the Chargers maybe a little bit more of a favorite. But because it's Dallas, the books know they'll get killed. And they can always make Dallas less of a favorite or less of an underdog, and they're still going to take money on them. That's the way the Cowboys work. It's like Notre Dame in college football. But that being said, I like the Panthers, but the line does say to take Dallas in this game, that Carolina has no home field advantage whatsoever. I mean, Howard, you cover fantasy and reality just as much as I do. Are the Panthers not supposed to be as good this year? Are they missing something? I feel like they're more or less this team that they were last year, a team that could win 9 games, 10 games. But what this says is Dallas has a good shot to win this game, and they're giving Carolina no home field advantage whatsoever. It's a smelly pick for me. It's just one at this point on Tuesday that I'll dive in more before Friday. But as of right now, I can't give you a pick one way or the other. The pick says to take Dallas.
I'm actually surprised about the line. I really am, because, unless they think Norv Turner is going to be a failure with Cam Newton, I don't really understand this line, especially with Dallas, the fact that they lost their center. Travis Frederick, he's hurt. Zach Martin's all banged up. This line is not not going to be able to protect. They have no receivers. You got Zeke, and that's it. I mean, if you're expecting Carolina to just hone in on Zeke and stack the box and try and shut him down, I honestly, it blows me away that the line is the way it is right now. I don't think even Dallas's secondary is really that strong. So,
well, there's a reason why it is that, and that tells you that it's Dallas. That's really the truth. When Vegas makes a line like this and it doesn't look right for one team, it's usually the team that should cover in that spot. So, but again, always when we go over this every single week, you'll see the Cowboys lines in general, unless they really are bad, and then Vegas will have to adjust, or really are good. But usually at the beginning of seasons, they know there's going to be so many bettors on the Cowboys that they could do this, Howard, and people are still going to take Dallas. But you're right. If I was making the line, I'd make Carolina 4.5, 4, give them like a point of advantage. They're telling you that Carolina has no advantage being at home against Dallas this week. So something's off with that one too. As of now, that's not a pick that I would make. So those 2 games, Chiefs, Chargers, Dallas, Carolina, and then as we get closer to the end of the week, I'll have a better idea Friday night, and then we'll make our 5 picks for the Super.
Our Super Contest picks. Absolutely, I can't wait for that, man. I'm pretty psyched. I'm what you told me about the top 5 picks for Super Contest when they released what everybody took, and how the top 5 always like. The
consensus is an 0-5
right there.
Baltimore, New Orleans will be there. New Orleans will be there.
Yep. New Orleans will be there.
Denver, Seattle won't be anywhere in the consensus. It'll just be, in my opinion, if I end up doing it. Yeah, but the other thing too, Howard, is that if tomorrow the lines will come out. So if it's look, if the Ravens on the Super Contest are -8 or -8.5, they may not be. People may start buying back and taking Buffalo at that point. Maybe look, somebody can make the case for the Bills. Look, they were in the playoffs last year. Their defense was pretty good. Like you can try to make those claims, but it'll be interesting each week. The one thing that I hate is taking the game and then it ends up in the consensus. That's like my worst nightmare because I'm like, there's a loser for you right there.
All right, guys, when we come back on Friday, again, we're going to be talking more in detail about the Super Contest. We're going to be making our picks with the Super Contest. We're also going to be checking in on some of these lines that we just talked about for college football and for the NFL. So join us 9 p.m. Eastern, Friday night. That's when Craig and I will be doing all of our stuff here at Wager Alarm. We thank you very much for tuning in. Best of luck to you in all the bets you're laying.